Hey everyone, and welcome to Ain't Life Great 4x4 vehicle reviews. Today I've got a 2003 Jeep TJ Rubicon. We're going to take it for a quick spin. We're going to talk about on-highway, off-highway, as well as how it could be used for, extreme rock crawling, maybe some overlanding, and where this kind of fits in the pecking order. The costs of these vehicles are starting to come down in the used market. This particular Rubicon trim is holding its value, and rightfully so, because we've got a 4-to-1 transfer case, lockers front and rear. This one has a OME minor suspension lift with 3-inch tires and the removable sway bar disconnects. We're going to take a ride and hop in and let's have some fun. Getting out on the pavement, starting out on the Jeep TJ. When the TJ came to the market with many of the trim levels with such luxuries such as carpet in the interior and air conditioning, this thing was just amazing. It was like the luxury Jeep. It was unreal. And especially the suspension tuning made highway driving significantly better than a CJ7 at those 65 mile an hour speeds. Now we laugh at that now because as I'm driving, I'm only doing well, the speedometer says 40. I've got 33-inch tires though. The wander, the road feel, I'm driving this car. The highway drive isn't even like my 100-inch wheelbase Discovery 2. Just takes little moves of the steering wheel, and you've got body roll, and it's just, you'll get tired, especially if you're driving long distances, like for us to the Rubicon Trail or Moab even. There's a reason you see a lot of these on the trailer. The highway ride just isn't the best, but you've got to realize that when this was designed, speed limits were 55 miles an hour. Now you lift these things, the narrow wheelbase, you put 33-inch tires on it, and you're driving on freeways trying to hit 80, and it was just not designed for that. And so for that, I don't fault the TJ. It is what it is. The straight six engine is legendary, and for good reason. It's reliable, it's robust, and for off-roaders, it's got low-end torque. It's not the speed demon, but AMC, when they introduced this engine, and Chrysler later, when they modified it, put the fuel injection on it, they kept the throttle response that I've harped about in my other videos, meaning that there is a linear progression from the throttle pedal, the accelerator pedal, to the throttle, controlling the amount of power I get to the engine matched to the torque curve, so that when I put my foot down, I get a linear application of torque over time. What this means is when I'm rock crawling, I have control. There's control there. I give it a little bit of gas and I can slowly increase my speed rather than lurching. And it's matched so that rock crawling becomes very easy. The problem with the 4-liter engine is it's not high on horsepower, especially peak horsepower, because the long crankshaft and the push rod design can't really build as many revs. You can add stroker kits to it, which some people do, or they swap out for a V8. LS swaps is the craze nowadays. And the reason you do that is if you're going to be jeeping in the sand, and you need that horsepower and you need that speed, because the 4-liter is not going to get that for you. I'm going to take this just a little bit up to highway speed. I'm at 55, 60 miles an hour right now. And, I got some body roll, especially if I give it a little bit with the steering wheel. It's noisy, it's rough, it's a Jeep. And that's okay, because the Wrangler's job is to be the top of the pack, at least in the United States, as far as off-road prowess is concerned. This 4-liter straight six, I'm not a huge fan of the idle sound. It doesn't have that throaty sound that a V8 has, but the torque application, again, is just awesome. The gas mileage is fairly decent for a vehicle of this vintage. As far as the engine is concerned, I had it in a Grand Cherokee ZJ, this motor, and I was getting 18, 19 miles per gallon. You won't get that in the Wrangler, and that's not the motor's fault. That's the design of the vehicle. It's a brick. it's a brick with a lot of turbulence underneath the vehicle because of the suspension. You're just not going to get good gas mileage out of this thing. But the application of torque is awesome. The reliability is phenomenal. There's a couple things you need to worry about with the exhaust manifolds, maybe the head gasket, but those are rare and infrequent, not like a Rover V8 that you're paranoid about your temperatures all the time. This thing is an amazing motor. When the TJ came out, it had coil springs for the first time. This was a drastic change from Jeep. The old CJs had leaf springs up front, and the problem with the leaf springs, the shackle mounts up front would hit rocks and obstacles. It drastically reduced your approach angle. By putting the coil springs over the axle, increased your approach angle, which made for very good off-roading. Most people were happy with the change. I do remember walking around in Moab when these first came out. People were questioning the strength of the axle system, the strength of the suspensions, if the coil springs could hold up. All these questions were going on in a few Jeepers' mind, and that's normal, especially if you're a Jeeper. You hate change. That's just what they do as a community. They despise change. What they have works, and they don't want it changed. Even if it's an improvement, they're very, very slow to accept that change. And if you don't get it, well, it's a Jeep thing, and you wouldn't understand. I mean, I went through that when the TJ was released. I was 16 years old. People were questioning, is this thing going to hold up with the CJs? Is it going to hold up with the YJs? And eventually it just blew them out of the water. The same with the JK. We'll talk about that when I review that. There was a lot of people calling the JK junk because they increased the size and dimensions. And it's true that the size and the dimensions become a hindrance on some trails on the JK, but it's an advantage on others. And we'll talk about that in another video. Right now, let's talk about the TJ off-road. It's winter time. There's not a lot of trails, but I've got this little communication tower trail we're going to go up. I'm going to kick it into 4 low and try this 4-to-1 transfer case. Set that back. Oh, that went in smooth. Put that in first gear and off we go. I never had the privilege of really spending a lot of seat time in the Rubicon. This first gear is just amazing on how low that is with the 4-to-1 transfer case. Most of the TJs I've had some Saharas and a Sport that I wheeled in Moab. They just had the regular 2-to-1 transfer case, and it is nothing like this one is. In fact, I'm going in 4th gear now out of my 5-speed transmission in what I'd normally be in at about 2nd or 1st in a regular TJ. And that just adds to the control and the torque multiplier of rock crawling with that, again, the 4-liter engine, the straight 6, and just makes this vehicle so much better than the already excellent TJ Sport and the TJ Sahara. Now, when this vehicle came out, one of the 4-wheel drive magazines was following the Camel Trophy at the time, and they also had a review of the TJ Wrangler versus the Land Rover Defender 90. So this had been about 1997. And I remember it was a narrow shootout. The TJ was much improved, and the Defender won. Mainly, the beauty of the Defender is its LT230 helical geared all-wheel drive transfer case with the ability to center lock the center differential, and you have about a 3-to-1 gear reduction. And it wasn't until 2003 when this Rubicon, or 2002 I guess, when this Rubicon trim was released. And what the Rubicon trim gives you is axle lockers front and rear from the factory. When this trim was released, by that time federal regulations made it so the Defender was no longer viable in America. And I always wish we'd have had another shootout, because honestly I don't see how a factory Defender 90 could beat the TJ Wrangler Rubicon. It is just awesome as far as the potential is concerned. Now this one we mentioned has a mild OME lift with the shocks and the OME, I believe they're heavy duty coils, which is supposed to help out with the ride a little bit because of the loading. And it has roughly 33-inch tires. And that's it. You know, we have some bumper modifications front and rear and some sliders on the side to protect rock damage. And we went to the Rubicon Trail, and this thing just killed that trail. I was driving with my dad in his stock JK Unlimited 4-door, so the long wheelbase Rubicon, and we'll talk about how that one fared on the Rubicon Trail later. And it was bone stock, and we also had a couple JK Unlimiteds, the longer 4-door JKs, one with 37-inch tires and one with 35s. And they all struggled on that trail because of the size of their vehicles and having to pivot around rocks. And they were pivoting on their rock sliders. I mean, we're not talking just backing 3-point turns. We're talking getting on a rock and pivoting on that rock to get out. Whereas this vehicle would just go through. It would just climb up. It would just climb around. And you didn't need huge tires. It was not a problem. The trail was not a problem. And off-road, you just can't beat this. You can't beat this. I'm looking out the windshield now, and my view is unparalleled. I can see the front fenders where my wheel line is. That was not there in the Hummer. I can lower the window here and lean out, and I can actually see the tire. That's huge. I had big fender flares on the Hummer H3. The WK2 Grand Cherokee was kind of in the way, and there's just nothing that beats this. And this is we're in the winter, so the hardtop's on and the doors are on. Usually when we go to Moab, the hardtop's off, the doors are off, and you can see even better than what you can see now. This is the standard, this vehicle. Again, I want to mention this is the last of the classic Jeeps. You will never have an off-road vehicle which feels like this one does. A 93-inch wheelbase, narrow track width. This thing just moves. Some of the downsides, we've talked about highway driving. Off-highway downsides. What are some off-highway downsides? Well, one, especially if you have a family, there's no room for gear. They made near the end a LJ version, which was slightly longer with a little bit more room. But the TJ just doesn't have the room you're looking for, nor the coil spring capacity for extended backcountry travel if you're going to go with more than one person. Now, if it's just you can probably take seats out, and if you pack good and pack light, there are people that can backcountry with this for a couple days. But really, if you've got more than an extra person, you're probably going to want to look at a Discovery 1, Toyota 4Runner, vehicles like that, because you're going to have more room to carry your gear. This, we'll show the back. I don't even think for this video I'm going to bother getting my fridge out. I just don't see that happening because there's really just no room. We're going to talk a little bit about the interior. Here is the dashboard. TJ Wrangler. We've got oil pressure, engine coolant, a little speedometer, tachometer, battery gauge, and the fuel gauge. And you got this hard plastic. It actually armor-alls and shines really nicely. You have a bin up top, which is really good now for a cell phone. If you've added an aftermarket radio, you can hook into the aux port and you're good there. The gauges are all nice. This has good feedback to it. This one feels really chintzy. And this one, which runs the HVAC, also has good feedback. The shifter, again, this vehicle feels really good. The 4-wheel drive, go and shift it into 4-high, or into 2-wheel high right now because we're done. You got a couple cup holders, a really small center console. They mounted the Cobra CB here, and then the glove box. Now, I've been overly harsh about the interior of this TJ in the past. I'm kind of an interior snob, and it's a lot of hard plastic. Call it a Fisher-Price interior. It's not heavy-duty materials by any stretch, especially when you compare it to a Jeep CJ7, which is all steel, metal, and chrome. And so, but it's held up over the years. It is what it is. It's functional. It just works, especially off-road. And that is why the Wrangler is the standard in the United States. It is the best off-road vehicle you can get, model year dependent. It's just the best off-road. And that's what, the other vehicles compared to the Wrangler, may give you vastly better highway driving experience, vastly better highway stability. They'll give you better gas mileage. They may give you better payload, size for more people. But all of that is at a detriment to off-road performance. As long as you don't hit what we call Jeep traps, meaning pits or steps that are sized such that a short 93-inch, 94-inch wheelbase has struggle climbing, like some of the climbs at Sand Hollow on the extreme trails, this can't be beat. It's maneuverable on the trail. It's got the gearing you want. I mean, really, you buy one of these, put a mild lift on 33-inch tires, and you take on the Rubicon. As long as you're up on your maintenance and you're experienced in your off-road driving, this vehicle can do it. And there are very few that can. And that is one of the major advantages to the Wrangler platform. And that's why it's so popular in the off-road community, both for overlanding and rock crawling, because you can take a stock Wrangler and modify it to suit your needs, whatever you enjoy off-road wise. And now if you need the extra space, you need the gas mileage, then there are other vehicles which come into play here. But the ultimate is the Jeep Wrangler. It just is. All right, everyone, some final thoughts as I'm heading back now to return this Jeep TJ. To me, subjective stuff is very important. I mentioned that I'm an interior snob. I would have liked to have seen some better interior materials, but on a vehicle at this price point and the ability to have a hose-outable interior, you can take your hose and clean everything off, the interior is just fine. But subjective to me, the interior, the driving dynamics, how I feel when I'm in the vehicle, to me that is very important. And a lot of times you get in this number crunch and you're like, well, I'm going to buy this vehicle because it's reliable and it has the best gas mileage and whatever. To me, I place very highly on, is this thing very fun to drive? Do I want to get in this vehicle? And for the Jeep TJ, I can say yes. Viewing it is fun. The dynamics are fun. Yeah, it wanders. Yeah, I wouldn't want to drive this to the Rubicon. I wouldn't want to drive this to Moab for a day trip. For us, it's like 4 hours down. Then you do the Moab trail for 4 hours and 4 hours back home. That's a long day. I would be exhausted. But on the trail, especially, there is just nothing that really compares to a properly built Jeep TJ. And I think it's fair to say that. Granted, I've never driven a Defender 90, so if there are any viewers that want me to review a Defender 90, I would love to take a spin in one. But so far to me, out of all the vehicles I've driven off-road, a properly built TJ, the dynamics, the feel, even the manual transmission is just fun. And that's something that I think should be mentioned. It is fun to drive. It is a fun vehicle. That's why people get these, take the top off, they just drive on the sand in the beach, or they get them and customize them the way they want, and all they do is park at the mall. Because it's fun. Again, that trite phrase, it's a Jeep thing, you wouldn't understand. That's true. And there's pros and cons to everything, but it should be noted that this vehicle is just fun. And that's why it's so popular, and it's a classic. And it should be looked at if you're in the market for an off-road, rock crawler especially, overland vehicle, if you're solo, or if you're just doing day trips, maybe. There are probably better overland platforms, but, just an all-round fun, optional car. Man, this one should be on your list. You should test drive it. Maybe the highway driving isn't a big of an issue for you, but even if it is, you ought to at least test drive it before you decide to get a 4Runner or something else. Just so that you don't have to defend your vehicle, why the TJ is what it is and why it's up there in the legendary status, right up there with the FJ Land Cruisers, the original FJ Land Cruisers, the original Jeep CJ7s, the Land Rover Series 1, Series 2 Defender 90s. This vehicle is with those. The 1960s Bronco, the International Scout, all of those type of vehicles, that's what this is. This is the newest version of those classic vehicles that you can get in the United States. And that's why it's so popular even today, and the resale value has gone up.